Is that baby right there?
Yeah, lady is that side. The back of it.
We ain't long. Really? You gonna pay rent? So you got that job then? But that we ain't changed. Wall Street, man. It was in Webster, elementary school. She said they don't want to do it.
Unless you're gonna wait on the big court downtown, the big county courthouse.
It be enough these things going on now. It's hard not to, but the best time to do it is to wait till you that's what they
We ready to get started. I'm trying to wait for my boss member.
Yeah, I guess.
She told me, I mean, they definitely.
There's another reporter. Is that with Channel 7? The other reporter, is he with Channel 7 or with Channel 4? Oh.
Turn your thing. Repeat after me.
3 years later, still no justice.
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 On April 21st, 2014, a mentally ill woman delivered a baby at her grandmother's house. She put the baby on the box, on top of the trash, and told the baby she'll be back. She proceeded to walk to the store where a neighbor saw her and called her grandmother. Her grandmother arrived at her home where she found the baby, not knowing that Sharon Ferguson was the one who delivered it, and called the police. Now, Sharon Ferguson had her baby at her grandmother's house, where her mom died. Sharon Ferguson was mentally ill, and she still is mentally ill. However, the system has created a total injustice in her arrest. She has been charged with attempted murder. She has a very high bond of $125,000. And as you can see, in other case scenarios, the outcome was a lot different. We must fight for our mentally ill who are incarcerated, because the system is not designed to house incarcerated inmates. Sharon Ferguson is now at another mental institution being evaluated for a third time after she's been deemed incompetent twice. Melissa on numerous occasions to keep them posted on Sharon's case. We've asked for another bond hearing for a bond reduction. Denied. We've asked that she be released to a mental health facility. Denied. We've asked and we continue to ask, and now we ask that you free Sharon Ferguson. Repeat after me. Free Sharon Ferguson.
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 Sharon Ferguson is mentally ill, and her mental illness is documented. One of her teachers is here with us today, a teacher that taught her in high school, and she can attest to the fact that Sharon Ferguson's mental illness was throughout her school grades, throughout her high school years, and everything. Her teacher came to support because she knew that Sharon Ferguson was a victim of the system. Sharon Ferguson was a victim of rape 3 times before she was impregnated. Sharon Ferguson's mother, who was her only caregiver besides her grandmother, died suddenly. It made her spin into an unstable condition where she became paranoid schizophrenic. Sharon Ferguson is mentally ill. And we ask that the state look at the fact that they are housing a person who is mentally ill at the Greenville County Detention Center. This is the 3rd year of her incarceration. And it's making a terrible statement for the poor, for the impoverished, and for the mentally ill in Greenville County. Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson.
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 3 years later, still no justice.
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 Sharon Ferguson has a documented mental illness. She delivered her baby on April 21st, 2014, and now that little boy is 3 years old today. It's his 3rd birthday. He lives with Sharon Ferguson's family. He's been living with her family since he was 6 months old. He did not have drugs or alcohol in his system. He was just born to a mother who was unstable, who at the time we don't even know whether or not she realized she was pregnant. As a community, we must stand against these types of tragedies. As a community, we must stand and fight for our mentally ill. Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson.
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 3 years later, still no justice.
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 Sharon Ferguson is mentally ill, and we cannot allow the system to throw our mentally ill away because they can't handle them, because they don't know what to do with them. Sharon Ferguson has not been receiving the treatment that she needs at the Greenville County Detention Center. Sharon Ferguson has been put in the SHU in solitary confinement on many occasions because of the way that she acts out in the prison. Sharon Ferguson has been treated like an animal on several occasions. When her family went to see her, they weren't allowed to see her. And she's now in Columbia to be reevaluated for a 3rd time after she was deemed twice incompetent. competent to stand trial. The family wants answers. The family would like her attorney to reach out to them. His name is Stuart Surratt. He's Sharon Ferguson's public defender. The family asked that he reach out to them because on numerous occasions they've called, they've faxed, they've emailed, they came up here, they tried to contact him to no avail. We must have a system where even a public defender should care about the care of their clients. We have to demand that we have a system where public defenders step up to the plate. Although their service is free, they treat their clients just like this is a paid service. Sharon Ferguson has been served a total injustice. And we ask again that you free her. 3 years later, still no justice.
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 Free Sharon Ferguson.
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 If you look at the picture right here, you will see the different cases, and there are many others. With Sharon Ferguson, you can tell that she's being made an example of. On April 21st, 2014, she was charged with attempted murder. But not only that, they offered her a 12-year plea deal. She didn't sign the plea because, like we told her, why should you take a plea deal when this woman's child is deceased and she's free, and this woman's child is deceased and she's free, and this woman's child is in foster care and she's free? All three of these women's children tested positive for drugs. Sharon Ferguson's child didn't. All three of these women's children tested positive for alcohol. Sharon Ferguson's child didn't. The only difference in these cases is Sharon Ferguson is a poor, impoverished, African-American, mentally ill woman. The picture speaks for itself. Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson.
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 3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
We have to have a community that stands for issues like this. Our mentally ill do not deserve to be mistreated. They don't deserve to be misrepresented. They deserve the same treatment that she would have got had she been one of these women. However, Sharon Ferguson did not even have the mental capacity at the time of her arrest to tell the officers what had just happened with her. As I stated, we don't even know whether or not she knew she was pregnant. If they want to charge somebody, where's the man that impregnated her? Why are they looking for him to charge him? If they want to charge someone, charge the people who failed Sharon Ferguson, the people who continue to fail her. Sharon Ferguson is a mentally ill woman. She lives in Greenville County. Her mental illness was documented, and she has now been incarcerated for 3 years at the Greenville County Detention Center. Her baby is healthy. Today is his 3rd birthday. He's been with her family since he was 6 months old. He is not in the system. He's a healthy 3-year-old little boy. Her family is willing to take care of Sharon. They come to every hearing. They come to every solicitor's meeting. They come to every meeting with the public defender. We begged the judge to reduce Sharon Ferguson's $125,000 bond because in Greenville County we have murderers on the street right now whose bond was a lot less than $125,000. Where's the fairness in that? When Sharon Ferguson's child is still alive, she didn't kill her child. She was a mentally ill woman who delivered a baby at her grandmother's house. The only house that she knew to go to because of her state of homelessness, that was the only place she knew to turn. fight for justice for Sharon Ferguson. Because we cannot live in a community where the system is set up for complete failure for our mentally ill. Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 Sharon Ferguson community supports her, and they've reached out to me on numerous occasions asking me, what can we do? And I tell them, and I continue to tell them, that we can show up. We can be a voice for the voiceless. We can be humans and be humane and treat Sharon as if she's a human being and not like an animal in shackles. Sharon Ferguson's grandmother is in the hospital right now, very ill. Sharon Ferguson's grandfather, whose funeral she was not able to attend, is not here with us anymore because she was incarcerated at the time that he passed. We cannot have a system that cages our people like animals and treats them as if they're non-existent. And 3 years later, still we shout, Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson!
Not only do we love Sharon Ferguson, but we miss Sharon Ferguson. Sharon Ferguson is well known in our community. Her mental issues does not, suggest jail time. What we need from our community is for our community to stand up and to really fight for what's right for Sharon. Jail time is not the help that she needs. But let's get Sharon the real help that she needs. She needs community. She needs supporters. She needs people who love her. Her baby is in great shape. Sharon should be able to spend time with her child. No mother, no citizen of Greenville County should be treated this way. And so today we stand in solidarity to say free Sharon Ferguson.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
I don't know that I need this.
I've never used a bullhorn before. Hey, my name's Peyton Blau, and I have a foundation called Rehinge. And I use the pejorative used against people with mental illness, like myself. I'm also a picture of mental illness. And recover. And I use this pejorative saying that guy is off his hinges, so I started Rehinge. And I'll tell you what's not unhinged. It's not me. It's the system that we got. What's unhinged is that we used to have 3,500 psychiatric beds in this state, and today we have less than 500. So our largest mental health providers in the state are our jails and our prisons, and that is wrong, and it's a disgrace. There's actually a lot of good people, maybe some people trying to help Sharon right now, but their hands are tied. I've heard solicitors tell me we want to do something better. The beds aren't available. A lot of people, a lot of politicians have been screwing up for a long time, and now we have to deal with situations like this. And there is race issues, and there's stigma, and there's a lot of things we have to overcome. But let me tell you, jail is no place for somebody to recover. We're not making our neighborhood safer by locking somebody up. We're not making our communities any better. We're not saving any money by locking somebody up. And when they come out, they're generally worse off than when they went in. I've been in the Greenville County Detention Center. I've been in the bottom of the jail. I did 6 months one time because I suffer from a medical condition that caused me to not understand how to deal with a police officer. Caused me to not know how that affected my behavior. Had nothing to do with my character. And everything I know about Sharon, let me tell you, from this place standing here, is her character is rock solid. And she's got some rock solid friends, and this is no place for Miss Ferguson to be. We need to help, and we need a short-term solution, but we also need to work on the long-term solutions. Thank you for letting me speak to you all today.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 So as I said earlier, Sharon Ferguson does not deserve to be a victim of the system. She's been a victim her entire life, trapped inside a mind that would not let her free. Sharon Ferguson suffers mental illness and is documented. However, the state, the system, does not want to recognize the fact that Sharon has a problem. Instead, they want to set an example of her. Sharon Ferguson's 3-year-old baby, he turned 3 today, lives with her family and has been with her family since he was 6 months old. He is healthy. He was never addicted to drugs. He never had alcohol in his system. He was just born to a mother who didn't know what to do when she delivered him. We understand that there are laws set up for people to leave babies at drop points. We know all that. However, if you don't have the mindset to do so, how do you know to do it? If you don't have the resources, we are here determined to still give Sharon Ferguson the resources that she needs. Sharon Ferguson's community stands for freedom fighters today. And again, we ask, free Sharon Ferguson!
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 3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
3 years later, still no justice!
3 years later, still no justice.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson!
I know people who have committed murder who didn't even serve 3 years in prison. Sharon Ferguson has been in prison for 3 years today. She only had 1 court appearance, and that was for a bond hearing in which her bond was denied. That was a year and a half ago. She's been evaluated and reevaluated by mental health specialists and also a doctor that was hired by us, by the state. And they all determined that she was incompetent to stand trial. However, instead of the judge getting back to us in the 2 weeks that she promised, they shipped Sharon Ferguson off once again to be reevaluated. Even the nurse at the institution said she doesn't know why Sharon is back. The nurses at the institution said it was an injustice. We asked them in the beginning if they would just house Sharon Ferguson in a mental institution, and they denied that. We asked in the beginning if they would reduce Sharon Ferguson's bond, and they denied that. So now we ask that they free Sharon Ferguson.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 3 years later, still no justice.
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 I'm like, Sheriff's teacher Amanda, did you say something? You say something.
Tracy spoke to, or someone spoke to character and how that has nothing to do with mental illness. I taught sheriff for 3.5 years in high school. And when I saw the note on the news that she had written on the door, I recognized her handwriting. And I was angry that there was a baby in a box, and I was angry at the things in Sharon's life that had led up to that moment. And as Tracy said, we have to do better as a community, as people, as teachers, as parents, as pastors, as leaders. We have to do better. But what is happening to Sharon is not okay, and it's on all of our shoulders. Every day, Sharon brought me a Coke. Every single day. She's the reason I'm addicted to caffeine. She said it made me happier in fourth period. She gave hugs like nobody's business. She was a lover. And so the picture that you've seen on the news is not the picture of the girl that I know. And so I just ask that we not be so quick to judge and be quicker to ask ourselves questions about how people get to these places and the things in their lives that lead up to these kind of moments. And then ask, what is our responsibility to make those outcomes different? And so I stand with Tracy and this community and these people, and from now on we'll do better. We'll be a voice. If that's all we can do is stand and shout and scream, we'll stand and shout and scream because she can't. Nobody's hearing her voice. So we will be that voice.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 Learn about Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson!
Free Sharon Ferguson!
3 years later, still no justice!
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 Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 3 years later, still no justice!
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 There's one other thing I want you all to know about. Sometimes our leaders do things for us to see, but then they don't always follow through. I'm a spokesperson for something called the Stepping Up Initiative, a national initiative to reduce the number of mentally ill behind bars. Our county passed that resolution this past August. I encourage you guys to find that resolution and take it to your elected leaders and say, they passed this resolution, now let's follow up with it. So Your voice is powerful. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming out here today and speaking for those who don't have a voice. Because there's another little fact. If she ends up beyond jail, our prison guard ratio to inmates is 70-1 in this state. I was in a hearing yesterday, a Senate hearing, 70-1. 4 people were killed in mental health housing, possibly from lack of care. And our General Assembly, our senators, and our leaders, they need to hear from you that we care about this issue, that we care about people even behind bars. Because guess what? They get out. We need to give them love. We need to give them a job. We need to help them clean up their record. We need to get the medications they need, the help they need, the support they need. What's wrong? What's wrong? Let them hear it. Let your elected leaders hear your voice. That this is unacceptable. That people like Sharon need help, not punishment.
Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 3 years later, still no justice!
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 So before we leave, I want to ask that you all keep Sharon Ferguson's grandmother in prayer. I told her that we're going to do this. This one right here is for her. To let her know that we're still fighting, but also to encourage her to still fight as well. We want Sharon to return home to her family. We don't want Sharon to return home to an empty nest where she'll be confused and have to start her life all over. We need her grandmother. We need her aunts. We need her uncles. We need the family to be here and to be strong and to be healthy. So we ask that you all pray for her strength and her courage. Because she said to me the other day, at times she feels like giving up. But she thanks us for not giving up. Also, we must continue to fight for Sharon Ferguson. As Patty said, we have to talk to our elected officials. We can't be afraid to go to city and county council meetings. We can't be afraid to kick down doors and sign petitions. We can't be afraid to approach those who we elect to do this job for us. It's time that they answer the call. It's time. You know, they always speak of leaders in this community. They always speak of those who are dressed up in suits and ties and fancy dresses. But when I was a little kid, when I dressed up, my mother told me not to get dirty. Well, it's time to get dirty. It's time for them to come from behind the walls and come out from behind the desk and join us or join a movement to assist us in getting justice, not only for Sharon Ferguson, but others who are falling victim to the system. Because the ratio of incarcerated inmates who are mentally ill is very high. It's astronomical. We have to approach the state and the state house and be willing to stand on the floor and tell them face to face that we're not asking anymore. Asking is over. We're demanding justice. We are tired of begging for them to do a job that the laws were set up for them to do in the first place. The system has to be designed for the punishment to fit the crime straight across the board. The punishment can't fit the crime for certain people and then others get off with it. If Sharon Ferguson has been incarcerated for 3 years, lock those other women up. But that's not going to happen. So what's the next step? Get Sharon Ferguson the help that she needs. For the past 3 years, we've been begging the state. We've been in the courts. We've been talking to the solicitor. We've been asking her lawyer to get her the help she deserves. She can't help her mental state. But instead of them getting her help, they continue to keep her shackled like an animal. Sharon Ferguson spends 23 hours a day in shackles, in a room by herself. She doesn't deserve that. How is that going to help her? If they release her right now to the community, where is she going to go? What mental state is she going to be in? She's going to end up in the same position she was that landed her there in the first place. abused by some strange man that had sex with her for a sandwich. That's where she's going to end up. If we don't step up to the plate as a community and be strong and be vigilant in our charge and be vigilant in our actions and stop waiting for people to do stuff for us and start doing it for ourselves. Because we built this community and we have to stand up and stand tall. We have to take responsibility. If they're not going to be responsible for our people, we have to be responsible for them. We have to be the ones to say enough is enough. We can't be afraid to stand up when something wrong has happened. And people always say, oh, it's not about race, don't scream race. Well, you got to call it what it is.
Amen.
It's not always about race, that's true, but this time right here, the proof is in the pudding.
Right.
These other cases right here in South Carolina, this happened here. These other 3 women are not in jail. This woman got out for Christmas after she put her baby in a refrigerator. Her newborn son died in a refrigerator. She got out for Christmas. That's crazy. This woman right here buried her baby in the backyard. She got out within a month or 2 of incarcerated. And this lady right here, she had her child in the bathroom at the Bilo Center in the toilet. Left him there for hours. He was near death when he was found. She's out of jail. Where's the justice? Sharon Ferguson is mentally ill, and if I have to scream it to the top of my lungs every chance I get, I will. Because this is wrong. And we have to fight as a community. We have to call them out. We have to make them do their jobs. Like Patton said, we hire these elected officials to step up to the plate.
Work for us.
To work for us. There are bills passed. There are laws on the books. There's everything out there that's supposed to defend and protect people like Sharon, but they're not. We have to be the ones that's the voice for the voiceless. That's what freedom fighters is. We have to be the voice for the voiceless. We have to continue in our movement to drive and to push the people who are supposed to do their job to do it. If I go to work at night and I don't do my job, I get fired. So guess what? Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to fire the ones that aren't working for us and put the ones in office that are willing to. Maybe we need to fire the ones that are not willing to do their job and put people in place that are willing to work for us. Because the community doesn't deserve to have another Sharon Ferguson. The community deserves to be protected. The community deserves for all the laws to fit all people. And the community deserves justice, and so does Sharon Ferguson. Free Sharon Ferguson!
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 3 years later, still no answers.
3 years later, still no answers.
3 years later, still no justice.
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 Part of the reason that we don't have justice for Sharon Ferguson is because the media will not pay attention, not y'all. Thank you for being here. Khalif Browder rotted in Rikers Island until his brain was so befuddled that when he came out, he committed suicide. This is what Tracy is saying. What is going to happen to this woman when she comes out? Because she will come out. Freedom fighters will make certain she comes out. We don't live in a world where a mentally ill person is incarcerated. They get help. That's America. Okay? That's the America we want, is it not?